My name is Sarah Michelle Thompson, and I'm 32 years old. The night before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my entire world came crashing down in a way I never could have imagined. It was October 15th, 2024, and tomorrow I would become Mrs. Sarah Davidson. I had been planning this wedding for 18 months, every detail carefully orchestrated. The flowers were arranged, the cake was ready, and my dress hung pristinely in my childhood bedroom. But there was one last thing I needed to do: surprise my fiancé James with a wedding gift I had been secretly working on for months. The evening air was crisp as I drove through the familiar streets of Millbrook, our small town where everyone knew everyone's business. I parked outside James's family home, a modest two-story house with blue shutters that I had visited countless times over the past 3 years. His parents, Margaret and Robert Davidson, had always welcomed me with open arms, or so I thought. I clutched the small wrapped box containing a vintage watch that had belonged to my grandfather, something old, something meaningful. James had always admired it when he saw it in the photos at my apartment. I wanted to give it to him privately, away from the chaos that tomorrow would surely bring. The front porch light was on, but as I approached the door, I could hear voices coming from the living room window, which was cracked open despite the cool weather. I recognized James's voice immediately, then his mother's, then his father's. They seemed to be having an intense conversation, so I hesitated, not wanting to interrupt what appeared to be a private family moment. But then I heard my name. Sarah has no idea, does she? Margaret's voice carried a tone I had never heard before, cold, calculating. I froze on the porch steps, my heart beginning to race. Of course not, James replied with a laugh that sounded nothing like the warm chuckle I had fallen in love with. She's so trusting, so naive. It's almost too easy. Good, Robert's gruff voice chimed in. The insurance policy is substantial. Once you're married, if something were to happen to her. My knees nearly gave out. Insurance policy? What were they talking about? The hiking trip next month will be perfect, James continued, his voice growing more animated. Remote location, dangerous trails. Accidents happen all the time in the mountains. And I'll be the grieving widower, inheriting everything. The gift box slipped from my trembling hands and hit the porch with a soft thud. This couldn't be real. This had to be some sick joke, some terrible nightmare. She signed all those papers you had drawn up, didn't she? Margaret asked. The ones disguised as wedding planning documents? Every single one, James confirmed. She was so excited about the wedding, she barely read them. Joint bank accounts, life insurance beneficiaries, the works. She even added me to the deed of her grandmother's house. The house. My grandmother had left me that beautiful Victorian home worth nearly $500,000. I had been so in love, so eager to start our life together, that when James suggested adding his name just in case something happened, I had agreed without question. My chest tightened as the pieces fell into place. Every romantic gesture, every declaration of love, every promise of forever, it had all been a lie. I was nothing more than a target, a payday wrapped in wedding lace. Just remember, Robert's voice turned serious, you need to wait at least a year after the marriage before the accident. Any sooner and it might raise suspicions. A year. They were planning to let me live for exactly 1 year before murdering me. I backed away from the door slowly, afraid that even my breathing might give me away. My hands shook as I fumbled for my car keys, desperate to get away from this house of horrors. The man I was supposed to marry in less than 12 hours wasn't just planning to break my heart, he was planning to stop it from beating altogether. If you've ever felt completely blindsided by someone you trusted, you know that gut-wrenching moment when everything you believed turns out to be a lie. But what would you do if you discovered your fiancé was planning not just to betray you, but to kill you? Stay with me as I share how this nightmare unfolded and how I found the strength to fight back. But as I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, one question burned through my mind: how long had they been planning this? And more terrifyingly, how many signs had I missed along the way? Driving away from James's house, my mind raced back to how we had met 3 years ago. I needed to understand how I had become the perfect victim, how someone could look at me and see nothing but dollar signs. I had been working as a graphic designer at a small marketing firm in the city, living quietly in the Victorian house my grandmother Rose had left me. After her death, I had inherited not just the house, but also a modest trust fund she had carefully built over decades of saving. I wasn't wealthy by most standards, but I was comfortable, stable, and most importantly, alone. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 25, leaving me with no siblings, no close relatives except for grandmother Rose. When she passed 2 years later, I found myself completely on my own for the first time in my life. I threw myself into work, renovating the old house, and trying to build some kind of meaningful existence. That's when James appeared. I met him at a coffee shop near my office, a place I visited every Tuesday after my therapy sessions. Dr. Williams had been helping me process my grief, and those weekly visits had become a crucial part of my routine. James was there with a laptop, seemingly working on some important project, looking handsome and focused in that way that made my heart skip. "Excuse me," he had said, approaching my table with a warm smile. "I couldn't help but notice you're working on some beautiful designs. I'm actually looking for someone to help with marketing materials for my family's business." The family business, as it turned out, was a small construction company that Robert ran. James claimed he was trying to modernize their approach, bring in younger clients. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my work and my life. Looking back now, I could see how methodically he had gathered information about me. On our first official date, he asked about my family, my background, my living situation. I had been so lonely, so grateful for the attention, that I shared everything freely. I told him about losing my parents, about inheriting the house, about how isolated I sometimes felt. "You're incredibly strong," he had said, taking my hand across the dinner table. "Not everyone could handle so much loss with such grace." I had fallen for it completely. Here was someone who seemed to understand my pain, who wanted to help me heal, who made me feel less alone in the world. Within 6 months, he was staying over most nights. Within a year, we were talking about marriage. The manipulation had been so subtle, so expertly crafted. He would bring up financial topics casually, suggesting we should be practical about our future together. When I mentioned feeling overwhelmed by managing the house and my investments alone, he offered to help. When I expressed anxiety about making big decisions by myself, he positioned himself as my partner, my protector. "You shouldn't have to carry all this responsibility alone," he would say, stroking my hair as we lay in bed. "We're a team now. Let me help take care of you." I remembered the day I added his name to my bank accounts. We had been planning a vacation to Europe, and he suggested a joint account would make traveling easier. It made perfect sense at the time. Couples shared finances, didn't they? It was a sign of trust, of commitment. The life insurance policy had been his idea too. "We should protect each other," he had explained. "If something happens to either of us, the other should be taken care of." I had been touched by his thoughtfulness, his desire to plan for our future together. Even the proposal had been calculated. He had taken me to the spot where my grandmother used to take me for picnics as a child, a small meadow behind the old church. As he knelt with the ring, he had talked about building a family, about filling my grandmother's house with children and laughter. "I want to give you everything you've lost and more," he had whispered as he slipped the ring onto my finger. "You'll never be alone again." But I had been alone, hadn't I? I had been alone with a predator who was systematically positioning himself to inherit everything I had worked for, everything my family had built over generations. Sitting in my car outside a 24-hour diner, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text messages from the past few months. With fresh eyes, I could see patterns I had missed before. His questions about my daily routines, my weekend plans, my friendships. He had been mapping my life, understanding my vulnerabilities. I realized with growing horror that I barely had any close friends anymore. James had slowly, subtly encouraged me to spend less time with the few people I had been close to. "They don't really understand you like I do," he would say. "They're still treating you like you're fragile, like you can't handle your own life." He had isolated me so completely that if I disappeared, who would even notice? Who would ask questions? My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, my beautiful bride. Sweet dreams, Mrs. Davidson-to-be." Mrs. Davidson-to-be. Tomorrow morning, I was supposed to walk down the aisle toward a man who was already planning my funeral. But as I stared at that text, something shifted inside me. The shock was giving way to something else: anger. Pure, focused rage at being treated like prey, at having my love and trust weaponized against me. James had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated me. He saw a lonely, grieving woman, easy to manipulate and control. But he didn't see the strength that had carried me through losing everyone I loved. He didn't see the intelligence that had built a successful career from nothing. And he certainly didn't see the fierce determination that was now burning in my chest. I wasn't going to be a victim. Not tomorrow, not ever. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. How deep did this conspiracy go, and who else might be involved? I drove to the one place I knew I could think clearly: my grandmother's garden behind the house. Even at midnight, sitting on her old wooden bench surrounded by the roses she had planted decades ago, I felt her presence guiding me. Rose Thompson had been a woman who survived the Great Depression, raised 3 children alone after my grandfather died young, and built a life through sheer determination. Her blood ran in my veins, and I was going to need every ounce of her strength. My hands still shaking, I called the only person I trusted completely, my therapist, Dr. Williams. I knew it was late, but she had given me her emergency number months ago, insisting I use it if I ever felt unsafe. "Sarah?" Her voice was immediately alert despite the hour. "What's happened?" I told her everything, the words tumbling out in a rush. The overheard conversation, the insurance policies, the planned accident. As I spoke, I could hear her typing, taking notes. "Sarah, listen to me very carefully," she said when I finished. "First, you are not crazy. What you heard was real, and you are in genuine danger. Second, do not go home tonight. Is there somewhere safe you can stay?" I don't know. James knows all my friends, all my usual places. "What about a hotel? Pay cash, use your maiden name. We need to assume he's monitoring your credit cards and phone." The thought sent ice through my veins. How long had he been watching my every move? "Dr. Williams, what do I do?" "The wedding is in 10 hours. Everyone will be there, my coworkers, the few friends I have left. How do I explain this without sounding insane? One step at a time, she said calmly. Right now, your safety is the only priority. Tomorrow, we figure out the rest. I checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, paying cash and using my grandmother's maiden name, Rose Parker. The room was dingy and smelled of old cigarettes, but it felt safer than anywhere James might think to look. Unable to sleep, I spent the night going through everything with a fine-tooth comb. I logged into my bank accounts from my laptop, documenting every transaction, every change James had made. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past year, small amounts had been transferred from my accounts to ones I didn't recognize. Never enough to notice, but it added up to nearly $15,000. There were also several large purchases I didn't remember making: expensive equipment, tools, things that could easily be resold. He hadn't just been planning to kill me for the insurance money. He had been systematically draining my accounts for months. Then I found something that made everything click into place. Buried in my email spam folder was a message from my insurance company, dated 3 months ago, confirming a policy change that increased my life insurance benefit to $750,000. I had never made that change. My phone rang, making me jump. James's name flashed on the screen. "Hey beautiful," his voice was warm, loving, exactly the same as it had always been. "I know it's bad luck, but I couldn't sleep. I'm so excited to marry you today." I forced my voice to stay steady. I couldn't sleep either. Just wedding nerves, I guess. That's normal. "Sarah, I want you to know that marrying you is the best decision I've ever made. You've changed my entire life." The words that once would have made my heart soar now sounded like a death sentence. "I love you too, James." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. "I should let you get some rest. Big day tomorrow. Oh, and Sarah? Make sure you eat something in the morning. You know how you get when your blood sugar drops." After he hung up, I realized he was right. I did get dizzy when I didn't eat. How many times had he filed away these little details about my weaknesses, my vulnerabilities? I started making a list of everything I knew, everyone who might be involved. His parents, obviously. But what about his sister Jennifer, who had been so helpful with wedding planning? What about his best man, Marcus, who worked at the insurance company where my policy was held? The web seemed to grow larger and more sinister with every connection I made. Around 4 a.m., I made a decision that terrified and empowered me in equal measure. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to disappear into the night and let them wonder what had happened to their carefully planned scheme. I was going to show up to that wedding, and I was going to expose them all. But I needed help, and I needed proof. I called Detective Rodriguez, a woman I had met during a community safety workshop at the library. She had given a presentation about recognizing domestic abuse patterns, and something about her direct, no-nonsense approach had stayed with me. "This is Sarah Thompson," I said when she answered. "We met at the library workshop? I need help. Someone is trying to kill me, and I have proof." 2 hours later, Detective Rodriguez sat across from me in a 24-hour diner, reviewing the evidence I had gathered. She was a compact woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This is sophisticated," she said, studying the financial documents. "Whoever planned this has done it before, or they have help from someone who has." What do I do? Everyone I know will be at that church in 4 hours, expecting me to get married. "We're going to give them a wedding they'll never forget," she said with a grim smile. "But first, I need you to do something that's going to be very difficult. I need you to act normal. Go through the motions of getting ready. Let them think everything is proceeding as planned. While wearing a wire, she added, sliding a small device across the table. My mouth went dry. You want me to actually go through with the ceremony? Not the ceremony. But we need them to think you're going to. We need them relaxed, confident, maybe even bragging about how perfectly their plan is working. The next few hours would determine whether I lived or died, whether justice prevailed or whether James and his family would simply find another lonely woman to target. As the sun began to rise over what was supposed to be my wedding day, I realized that in a twisted way, James had been right about one thing. This day really was going to change my life forever. But not in the way he had planned. At 8 a.m., I stood in my childhood bedroom, staring at my wedding dress hanging on the closet door. The white silken lace that had once represented hope and new beginnings now felt like a costume for the most important performance of my life. Detective Rodriguez had positioned her team strategically around the church and reception venue. The wire she had fitted me with was nearly invisible, tucked beneath the intricate beadwork of my bodice. My phone was equipped with a recording app, set to upload everything to a secure server in real time. Remember, she had told me during our final briefing, your job is to stay safe and get them talking. We'll handle the rest. My maid of honor, Jessica, arrived at 9 a.m. to help me get ready. Jessica was an old college friend who had drifted back into my life when I got engaged. Looking at her now, I wondered if even this friendship had been orchestrated by James. You look nervous, Jessica said, zipping up my dress. That's totally normal. I was a wreck on my wedding day. Jessica, I said carefully, can I ask you something? How did you and James first meet? She paused, her hands stilling on the buttons. Oh, through mutual friends. Why? I'm just curious. Which mutual friends? Does it matter? Sarah, you're getting married in 2 hours. This isn't the time for random questions. The evasion confirmed my suspicions. Jessica was part of it. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Can't wait to see you at the altar, my love. Today begins our forever. I typed back, forever and always. At 10:30, we arrived at St. Mary's Church. The same church where my grandmother had been married, where my parents had exchanged vows. It felt like sacrilege that this place of family memories was about to become the setting for such betrayal. James was waiting in the vestibule, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo. When he saw me, his face lit up with what looked like genuine joy and love. If I hadn't heard that conversation last night, I would have melted at his expression. You're absolutely beautiful, he whispered, taking my hands. I'm the luckiest man alive. We need to talk, I whispered back. Before the ceremony. Alone. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, concern, calculation. Of course. Whatever you need. We slipped into a small side chapel, away from the gathering guests. James closed the door behind us, and for a moment, I was alone with a man who was planning to murder me. What's on your mind, beautiful? He reached out to touch my face, and I had to force myself not to flinch. I've been thinking about our future, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. About all the practical things we discussed. The insurance, the joint accounts, the house. What about them? His tone remained light, but I caught the sharpening of his attention. I want to make sure I haven't missed anything. I want to be a good wife, make sure I'm taking care of everything properly. Sarah, you don't need to worry about any of that today. But I do worry, I interrupted, stepping closer to him. Especially after what happened to my friend Rebecca. James went very still. Rebecca? From the hiking club I used to belong to. Remember? She died in that accident up in the mountains last year. Just slipped right off a cliff during what should have been a routine hike. I watched his face carefully. Rebecca was entirely fictional, but his reaction told me everything I needed to know. That's terrible, but Sarah. Her husband inherited everything. The life insurance, the house, her savings. It made me realize how vulnerable we all are. How important it is to have someone trustworthy to take care of these things if something happens to us. James's smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. You're absolutely right. It's good that we've planned ahead. Speaking of planning ahead, I continued, pulling out my phone. I was looking at those hiking trail maps you showed me for our honeymoon trip. Some of those paths look really dangerous. Adventure is part of the fun, he said, but his voice had changed. Cooler, more careful. I suppose accidents can happen anywhere, I said innocently. Even to experienced hikers. Even when they're with people they trust completely. The mask slipped. Just for a second, but I saw it. The warmth disappeared from his eyes, replaced by something cold and calculating. Sarah, he said slowly, what exactly are you trying to say? Before I could answer, the chapel door opened. Margaret Davidson stepped inside, her face tight with concern. James, people are starting to ask. She stopped when she saw my expression. Is everything all right? I think Sarah might be having some pre-wedding jitters, James said, never taking his eyes off me. Actually, I said, raising my voice slightly to ensure the wire picked up everything clearly, I was just telling James how much I appreciate all the planning he's done for our future. The insurance policies, the financial arrangements. Even the honeymoon itinerary. Margaret's face went pale. Sarah, dear, perhaps we should. I especially appreciate how thorough he's been, I continued. Making sure I'm well taken care of, no matter what happens. Even if there's some kind of accident. James grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. Sarah, stop. Why should I stop? I'm grateful. It shows how much thought you've put into this. How long have you been planning it? The whole thing, I mean. Meeting me, courting me, setting up all these policies and accounts. You're not making sense, he said, but his eyes were scanning the room, looking for exits. I'm making perfect sense. The only question is whether you were planning to wait the full year before the hiking accident, or if you were going to speed up the timeline. Margaret gasped audibly. James's grip on my arm tightened. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Don't I? Should we ask your parents? They seem to have very specific ideas about timing when I overheard you all discussing it last night. The silence that followed was deafening. James and Margaret stared at me with the dawning realization that their carefully constructed plan had just collapsed. You were at the house last night, James said slowly. I was. I heard everything. The insurance money, the inheritance, the planned accident. All of it. James's face transformed completely. The loving fiancé disappeared. 1 year after the trial ended, I thought the nightmare was finally behind me. I had settled into a new routine, found peace in my renovated home, and even started dating again carefully, slowly, but with hope. That's when the phone call came that shattered my newfound security. Sarah Thompson? The voice was unfamiliar, nervous. Yes? My name is Amanda Martinez. I think you saved my life. I set down my coffee cup, my hands already starting to shake. I'm sorry, I don't understand. James Davidson. He was engaged to my sister Elena before he met you. The world tilted. Elena Martinez. I had heard that name during the investigation, but the details had been sealed. She was the woman who had disappeared 3 years ago, the case that was never solved. Could we meet? Amanda's voice cracked. I have some things I think you need to see. 2 hours later, Amanda sat across from me in the same diner where I had met Detective Rodriguez that awful night. She was younger than me, maybe 28, with dark hair and eyes that held the same haunted quality I recognized from my own mirror. Elena was my twin sister, she began, sliding a photograph across the table. She met James 4 years ago, right after our parents died in a house fire. She inherited their property, about $300,000 in insurance money. The woman in the photo could have been my sister. Same build, same vulnerable smile, same trusting eyes. My stomach clenched. They were together for 8 months. Elena was head over heels, planning their wedding, talking about starting a family. Then one day, she just vanished. What do you mean, vanished? Amanda pulled out a thick folder. She went hiking. Alone, which was weird because Elena was terrified of heights. She left a note saying she needed to clear her head before the wedding, that she'd be back in a few days. But she never came back. They found her car at the trailhead, her purse still inside. Some of her clothes were found near a cliff edge, but no body. The police ruled it an accidental death after 6 months, said she must have fallen and the body was washed away by the river below. I stared at the police reports Amanda had brought. The handwriting in Elena's supposed suicide note looked forced, unnatural. James inherited everything, Amanda continued. The insurance money, the property. He played the grieving fiancé perfectly. Even I believed him at first. What changed your mind? I started going through Elena's things after the funeral. I found her journal hidden in her bedroom. The last few entries. Sarah, they're almost identical to what you went through. Amanda opened the journal to a page marked with a torn piece of paper. Elena's handwriting was neat, careful. March 15th, James suggested I update my life insurance policy today. He says it's responsible planning for our future. He was so sweet about it, saying he wants to make sure I'm taken care of no matter what happens. I love how thoughtful he is about our life together. My blood ran cold. It was almost word for word what James had said to me. March 22nd, something strange happened today. I was looking for my bank statements and couldn't find them anywhere. When I asked James if he'd seen them, he said I must have put them somewhere and forgotten. He's probably right, I've been so scattered lately with wedding planning. April 3rd, James brought up that hiking trip again. He really wants me to try that trail in the mountains. I told him I'm scared of heights, but he says I need to face my fears. He's probably right. He usually is about these things. April 8th, I can't find my grandmother's jewelry box. James says I probably misplaced it during the move, but I know I put it in the bedroom closet. I'm starting to feel like I'm losing my mind. The entries painted a clear picture. The same manipulation, the same gaslighting, the same systematic isolation that I had experienced. There's more, Amanda said, pulling out a manila envelope. After your story hit the news, 3 other women contacted me. James didn't just target you and Elena. She spread out photographs and documents. 3 women, all bearing a striking resemblance to Elena and me. All had lost family members recently. All had inherited money or property. All had encountered James Davidson in their time of grief. Rachel Stevens, 2018. Supposed suicide by drowning. She had been engaged to James for 6 months. Lisa Park, 2019. Car accident on a mountain road. Engaged to James for 4 months. Monica Walsh, 2021. Hiking accident, very similar to what they planned for Elena. She survived but was severely injured and has no memory of what happened. I felt sick. How many others do you think there are? We don't know. But Sarah, here's the thing: James didn't work alone. The Davidsons, they've been running this operation for years. Maybe decades. Amanda pulled out one final document, a property deed from 1987. Robert Davidson purchased a burial ground that year. An old, abandoned cemetery outside of town. The kind of place where you could dispose of evidence without anyone asking questions. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You think that's where? I think that's where Elena is. And Rachel. And Lisa. And probably others we don't even know about yet. I pushed back from the table, struggling to breathe. The scope of what James and his family had done was beyond anything I had imagined. They weren't just criminals, they were serial killers who had been operating for decades. Amanda, we have to take this to the police. Detective Rodriguez. Already done. That's actually why I'm here. Amanda's expression grew grim. There's going to be another investigation. They're going to exhume the burial ground, look for remains. And they want you to testify again. About what? I already told them everything. About the others. About the pattern. Your case broke this whole thing wide open, Sarah. Without you, these families would never have gotten answers. I thought about the letter James had sent me from prison, claiming his feelings were real. How many other women had he written similar letters to after he'd killed them? How many families had been left wondering what happened to their daughters, their sisters? There's something else, Amanda said quietly. James is appealing his conviction. His lawyers are claiming you entrapped him, that your testimony was fabricated. They're saying you were mentally unstable and imagined the whole conversation. My hands clenched into fists. That's impossible. There were recordings, which his lawyers claim were edited. Sarah, I need you to know that this isn't over. James has money, connections. His family had been doing this for so long, they have resources we're only beginning to understand. That night, I sat in my grandmother's garden, trying to process everything Amanda had told me. I had thought exposing James would be the end of my ordeal, but it was only the beginning. How many other families were out there, still searching for answers? How many other women were buried in that forgotten cemetery? My phone rang. Detective Rodriguez. Sarah, I need you to come in tomorrow. We have some developments in the Davidson case that you need to know about. Amanda Martinez already told me about the other women, about the burial ground. It's bigger than that. We've been tracking the money trail from James's accounts. Sarah, the Davidsons weren't just killing for insurance money. They were part of something larger, a network of people who target vulnerable individuals for financial gain. I felt the world spinning around me. What kind of network? The kind that has connections in insurance companies, law enforcement, even the court system. The kind that's been operating for decades without getting caught. Are you saying there are others? Other families like the Davidsons? I'm saying that what you uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. And now that we're pulling at this thread, the whole thing is starting to unravel. After she hung up, I realized that my decision to confront James that day had done more than save my own life. It had opened the door to justice for countless other victims. But it had also made me a target for people with far more power and resources than I had ever imagined. As I sat in the darkness, surrounded by my grandmother's roses, I made a decision. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let fear silence me. If there were other victims out there, other families searching for answers, then I was going to help them find those answers. The next phase of this fight was about to begin, and this time, I wouldn't be fighting alone. But as I walked toward my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The nightmare wasn't over, it was evolving into something far more dangerous than I had ever imagined.